In this final episode with my guest, Don Moxley, we talk about cannabinoids, HRV, and smart training for the over 40 athlete. There's a lot of misinformation out there about HRV with all this new wearable technology. And Don Moxley also goes into the effects of THC, certain compounds of CBD, and the real molecule that all of us want, which is CBDA, which is not always listed or sourced properly for a lot of the CBD products out there. And so he gave some suggestions on how to get it and what he puts all his athletes on, not only to improve their performance, but also their HRV score. So if you're interested, stay tuned. This is part 3 of 3 of an interview I did with Don Moxley. If you'd like to catch up, just go back a couple episodes. How's it going? This is Brad Williams with Over 40 Fitness Hacks, the podcast where I help you, being over 40, to fight the aging process without giving up your social life. I've been a personal trainer and gym owner for over 14 years, and I specialize in helping the over 40 crowd get to their goal. If you need a little bit of guidance, check out my show notes. I have a link to schedule a free 15-minute Zoom call, and you can ask all the questions you want. But enough of that. Let's get on with the episode. Well, Don, let's go back. You were touching a little bit on the cannabinoids. That's the feeling that we're getting the runner's high and all that. And then we wanted to talk about cannabis and human performance. As far as dealing with trauma and your HRV, I mean, okay, so cannabinoids can help. How do you segue into human performance with that? I was real interested on your thoughts because it seems more of a calming thing versus performance. To me, sounds like you're back in that fight or flight.
That's exactly right. And that's our challenge today. Brad, at an elite level, everyone's training hard, okay? Everyone goes hard. The benefit, you don't get stronger training hard. You get stronger recovering from a hard training session. Number one, so anything that you can do to drive improved recovery will create improved performance, okay? And then that combined with the two things I really pay attention to, I tend to look at training through the lens of economics rather than through physiology. So in my mind, every time I start a workout, it's what is the amount of work necessary to trigger the signal that I want metabolic to get my body to respond optimally in that amount of time. You know what? When I was at Ohio State, we had a very talented wrestler, 2-time national champion. We were talking about overtraining, and he said, wherever that overtraining line is, I want to be one step short. Here's what he wasn't taking into consideration, that there was a lot of distance between trigger of optimum recovery and that one step short, okay? Wasting money, wasting economic, metabolic money. And I think this is the thing that we're starting to move. Everyone goes hard now, everyone. The question is, who is getting the best payback? You and I can take $1,000 and invest it. And you can invest yours all in one, and I can invest mine and diversify it, and I might get a better response because of my diversification. This is the same thing with training. How am I diversifying my training? Where am I spending my time? Zone 2, 3, and 5. Where am I engaging in strength and conditioning? Where am I engaging in other forms of exercise? Okay. Where am I putting my diversified energy? This is an important part of this. And again, making sure that you have the necessary nutrients on board. This is where cannabis comes into play. Until I started working in the cannabis business, I didn't see this research. And the research is voluminous, okay? There is so much research in this space, it's ridiculous, but it's almost behind a veil. No one wants to touch it because it's hot, marijuana. But cannabis was part of the U.S. pharmacopoeia till 1948. The American Medical Association in 1948 was arguing with Congress to keep cannabis available to doctors for prescription. But the Marijuana Tax Act in 1948 basically took this all away. There's some interesting politics that went with that. We're finally getting past it. I think we're finally going to read cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug right now, which there's going to be a ton of benefit that comes from that. And literally, I'm getting newsletters and emails on a daily basis about, okay, we're almost there. Yeah. But we've been almost there for 5 years now. I think we're close. But it's the ability to recognize the value. There's 140 different cannabinoids. There's 138 things besides THC and CBD. And then when we go on top of that, there's probably 400 different terpenes. These are plant chemicals that enhance or by themselves are very beneficial. In that plant, that can be very beneficial. Now, I don't believe THC is a performance enhancing product. Okay. There's too many things to go with. You start to move the CBDA, the molecule that comes out of the plant, and some of the terpenes, you can get a huge benefit. And that's why we put it in mode method.
Yeah, it took a while coming from my background of personal training and a little more aesthetics, also health, promoting that as well too, but more aesthetics, I think, in my younger years. And that's what everyone was paying us personal trainers for. Hitting my 40s and making that switch. And then from our training back in the day, it was more of stimulating that muscle by tearing it down, working it hard, mechanical tension as much as you can. And that's how you get to grow. And then learning later that will work, but it's not the better way. It doesn't take much to affect the stimuli of your muscles. It's a hormonal response where I can get just as big as I wanted to using half the weight, a little bit more time under tension and recovery, just like you're saying. And oh my God, why did I beat myself up in my 20s doing all this when I could have done it so much easier and better?
Because that's what we thought.
Exactly. So I learned that not from reading books or anything. I learned it from just biohacking my own body and testing theories out. And lo and behold, I'm now have no joint pain. I feel so much better. I've got the body of a 20-year-old again, like I used to, so much happier. So it's like you start learning all these things just by listening to your body. So
have you played around with blood flow restriction yet?
Yeah, I did have someone in my gym that had that stuff. I never got to really get my hands on one because I didn't want to buy it at the time. And I've had some people in my podcast talk about it, and it's always been on my horizon. I just never got it to mess with it because everything else is working so great.
Check out my friends at bestrong.com.
Okay.
And pretty affordable. The Katsu stuff is expensive.
That's where who was renting space from one of my gyms.
Yeah. So the Katsu stuff, good. I don't want to minimize it, but it's pricey. You can go to the folks at Be Strong. They're out of Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. Jim Stray Gunderson was the founder of the Jim passed away a couple of years ago. His son's driving it now. The technology and the science is elite. It's very good. And again, the thing that's changed in my mind, things, economics. Okay, where do I get the biggest bang for my buck?
Yep.
And what are the tools that I can use to improve those economic and blood flow restriction? Using heart rate training, blood flow restriction, these are all things that drive the economics of physiological response.
Yeah. My whole theory that I promote on my show is cutting half the weight down, doing stuff with more time under tension, and that blood flow restriction takes that even lower to where you're using a 5-pound weight and it feels like a 60-pound weight. So I get the science technology. I just haven't messed with it too much.
It doesn't make it hurt less.
Yeah.
It just gives you more benefit. And as we get older, we have challenge. Again, I turned 62 on my next birthday. 4 years ago, I had my 7th and 8th knee surgery. My 7th was to remove loose bodies from my knee from my 6th knee surgery 27 years before that. But I got an MRSA infection from that surgery. And my 8th was to clean that out. And it's taken me a solid 3 years to really get back from that. But blood flow restriction has been a huge part of that. The ability to do half the work, but get the same benefit. And that's part of the challenge. And as we get older and our recovery tends to drop, testosterone levels are dropping. I mean, that's one of the beauties of youth. When that furnace is burning hot, it can burn anything, right?
Yep.
But as our furnace slowly turns down over time, we've just got to be smarter.
Yeah. Wrapping up what we're talking about and going back to cannabis for performance, you mentioned that CBDA is more the molecule everyone's looking for and probably mostly for recovery so you can perform better. How is it with all the different products out there? Who do you trust? Who's got CBDA in it? Who's just got a bunch of garbage in it? Or
it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So trust your source. That's what I've been really focusing on this year.
Yeah. And your source should be able to provide certificate of analysis that show you what's in the product. If they can't, listen, I can go out and change the oil in my car, put it in a bottle, go to a flea market and sell it as CBD. Okay. And it has none and not good. Someone should be able to provide you a batch marked bottle. The great thing about cannabis is it's mostly available in most states. We have grows going in most states now. This is standard language. So you've got to really pay attention to the source. And just because, I would really be careful of these stores that say CBD and kratom. They've got to be able to supply the COA.
I was going to say, for going back to HRV, if you're taking CBDA and cannabis type products and very good products, they're sourced well, and you trust them. Should they be lowering your score while you sleep?
Improving.
Exactly. So what I've been doing has not been working. So that's telling me right there that there's some trauma going on with that CBD that I'm using, or who knows?
Yeah, one of the challenges is depending on where your CBD is coming from, whether it's been isolated or coming from hemp. So we've had a lot of people come back to us and say that the hemp blend that we're using in our product causes anxiety. It happens. Again, we talked about at the beginning, we're all genetically different. We'll have different response, and you may have to work with it a little bit. At some point in time, we want to formulate another version of our product that doesn't use hemp, but uses straight isolates. We'll get there eventually. But yeah, as a consumer, you got to work your way through it. You want to try and stay away from the THC. THCA with CBDA can be good. I love good ratios of that. Stay away from the THC. CBD is beneficial, but Brad, the problem is that most people need to consume about 10 to 100 times more than they're consuming to get the benefit. Okay. Now, let me put this in context. If you go buy CBD from a good source, you're going to pay $60 to $90 for a bottle that had between 1/2 and 3/4 of a gram. When I buy CBD, I buy it for $1 a gram.
Wow.
Okay. So the markup in this space is ridiculous. Wow. Okay. So, and again, this is going to change when we have interstate commerce, when all of a sudden we have rescheduling, you're going to see a normalization of the market.
Yeah. More competitors, it's just going to happen.
More pet and better quality
product. Yeah. Hey, one final question, Don, and I probably should have put this back in the HRV topic, and I'll probably just copy and paste it back in there. For an HRV score for the over 40 audience who's fit, they're into health and wellness and longevity. We understand that those Olympians have, you mentioned that 100+ score. I mean, we're obviously not going to be willing to do the work for that. What is a score that we should be shooting for? 20 and lower, bad, but what's something that some of us 40, 50-year-olds can achieve and should go for?
Something better than yesterday, last week, last month. Okay. We are all different. Okay. We all have backgrounds. We all have, again, those two guys that didn't make All-American. I believe there was significant trauma in their background. And you know what? That baseline to make All-American, I think a wrestler's got to have a 74 HRV score to make All-American. Those guys weren't there, and I'm not sure we could have gotten them there. But you don't want to look at this in an absolute term. You want to look at it relatively. Am I engaging in the processes? Okay. Am I exercising? Am I meditating? Do I have a sense of, am I doing the things to drive recovery? Okay. And there's a lot of things we can do. If you do that, you can probably be benefited. And Brad, I'll tell you this, I had a call with the guy 2 weeks ago, lived in the deep South. We were talking about meditation, and he said, prayer is my meditation. And I said, okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because I grew up Southern Baptist, okay? I grew up where you prayed for forgiveness for fear of living in hell for an eternity. That's a fear response, okay? My wife grew up Roman Catholic. They're very good at guilt, okay? I've changed my relationship with my God or my universe or whatever you want to call it. I believe in a loving, forgiving, I believe that's our nature. And I don't believe I can make a mistake bad enough if I'm in the right frame of mind that's going to cast me into hell forever. I don't have that fear response. So I had to have this conversation with him. He was in a very non-denominational, very evangelical setting. And he says, my prayers are fearful. And I said, we've got to start to work on that. Tell you another example. I have another guy I worked with. I was ATF 30 years. And we got to be buddies, and we spent a lot of time talking. And I like firearms. I like playing with guns. I'm an old farm kid. We've been doing it, so I'm not afraid of people. I like shooting things. I like going to the range and putting rounds down range. This guy had worn a firearm on his side for 30 years. And when it wasn't on his side, it was on his nightstand. And we were talking, and I said, Terry, I go, why do you keep a firearm on your nightstand? I said, do you live out of fear? That's exactly it. So you have to look at all these things. And again, we have a tendency to listen. Fear is a healthy thing. It keeps us alive. Again, you got us out of the rattlesnake pit. But the problem is when we move into a house full of bunny rabbits, we still have to deal with the physiological change. And when I'm living with bunnies, I'm not praying to not have rattlesnakes anymore. I'm thankful for bunnies.
Yeah.
And this is the switch.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole thing of whether you pray, you meditate, or just sit there and breathe and feel your body. Everything is more of positive affirmations and feeling good, enjoying the process, which helps calm that nervous system down. So I knew exactly what you're talking about when people are in that fear mode. That's not healthy.
Well, you got
Just don't do it that often.
yeah, when fear is real, you have to be able to respond. I told the story. So I grew up in a very evangelical church in Eastern Ohio. And I remember January 4th, 1976. That's the bicentennial, right? We had a revival at our church and I remember being overcome with what we call the sense of the Holy Spirit. I remember this today. Well, in my meditative practice, and as I've practiced meditation and learned this, I can now create that same experience meditating, being centered, being able to pull it all in. Now, it's not a religious experience, okay? It's a physical experience, but listen, religion is a collection of ancient practices that kept us alive for a long time. We then went through the Reformation, and we had the development of science and mathematics and things like that. And now we live in a time when we can use science to analyze the behaviors. Fasting, for example. Fasting is a very health benefiting practice. We now understand the science behind fasting. It triggers autophagy, and we know we need to have spermidine on board to get to there. So we know these things. This is what science has done for us. And I think we're starting to see the same thing where religious practices, they're there for a reason, okay? But we now start to be able to see the science to understand, and can we do this in a manner that's not fearful driving?
Nope. 100% agree with all that.
Yeah.
Well, Don, thanks for coming on my show, picking your brain on that. I'd love to have you on again, especially to talk more about autophagy and fasting. I talk about that all the time on my show. But how can my audience get a hold of you? Is a website, social media? What's the best place?
Yeah. If you want to learn about mode and method, HRV plus, go to modemethod.com, modemethod.com. That's where you'll learn about HRV plus. If you want to learn about our spermidine products, spermidinelife.us. If you want to get a hold of me, the best way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn, search for me, send a response. I get 2 or 3 questions a week from people out there. I usually schedule calls. I'm not an email guy. I like to have a conversation. And we do. Don't ask me a stupid question when you ask to connect. Just say, hey, I heard you on Brad Williams' podcast, and I've got questions about fill in the blank. I usually accept them, and we'll usually schedule a call.
Awesome. No, I'm the same way. Ever since Zoom came out, it's just so much more beneficial to see the person's face. I just like it better than the typical phone call or email. So, but yeah, my audience knows I'll put all those links in my show notes. And I just want to thank you again, Don, for coming on my show and enlightening us on some of these topics.
It's my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.